So we are live.
Okay.
So hello to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So tonight, August 13th, 2019, I am interviewing Michelle Embree, and I need to mute my phone. So let's see. It should be live now. I need to tweet it out though, because I still haven't figured out how to pre-schedule using Zoom. That is probably the biggest issue that I have with Zoom, is the fact that I can't pre-schedule it, and I have to, there's a way to do it. I tried doing it once, then unfortunately when I did, it created a whole new video. And then I had to, so then basically at that point, I think I had given 3 different links for the same interview.
Oh, right. Oh.
So I kind of freaked out. So after that, I kind of decided to hold back on putting out the link. I am still CW Chanter in here, so I need to fix that. Hold on. I don't want to chat as CW Chanter. Or else that'll get confusing. Let's try this. Okay. Because I used to have this problem where it saves one and then goes as the other. All right. Now I am myself. Okay. So I'm going to quickly, please bear with me, Michelle. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'm going to tweet out the link for anybody that is not aware.
I'll retweet it.
Well, thank you. I don't think CW is here yet, though I did just message him telling him that I was live. Can't find it. Awesome. Okay. CW cannot find the link, or can't find the video, unfortunately, guys. Hold on. Retweet. Comment. Live now. Tweet. Okay. Now I'm going to send a custom invite to CW Chanter so that he can find it.
Okay.
Still getting complicated, guys. I'm sorry. Copy link. Paste. All right. Link has been sent to him. I know. Okay. So he has found us. We are good to go. All right. So hello again, everyone. Sorry about that for the slight delay. I was running late. It took me a minute to get the link going. Everything's just kind of a mess, but we are fully pulled back together now. So I just want to say hi to people in the chat. We have Jiggy, Jonaside, Baz, Crystal, Entropic Horizon, JM, Rick Von Himlick, Bee Gees, Adamind, David Bucky, Jonaside, Crystal ASMR, Golden Coin 100, Robin, Eagle Song, Lisa Kane, Catherine, Darlene, Jet Petty, Shooting Star, CW did make it, as we said, Alfie Solomons. So here we go. Got a nice full house, and Rogue Faction just joined. So I want to thank you all for joining, and KB. And I want to thank Michelle again for joining and for being very, very patient with me tonight.
No worries. No worries.
All right. So before we get started, I'm going to read a quick bio on Michelle so everybody can kind of get an idea of who she is and why I invited her on. So Michelle's been practicing tarot since about 2002 when she was introduced to it by a friend. She Currently holds a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Philosophy from McKendree University and a Master of Fine Arts in Writing from Goddard College. She's an ordained minister as well as a writer. She writes modern myth as well as performing it, as well as having written a young adult novel. She does practice as a spiritual counselor, and she does regular tarot readings, I believe, for people as for paying customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that is wonderful. And so I guess my first question would be, is that your main focus with regards to your spiritual counseling? Do you base it on the tarot?
I do for almost entirely. I mean, every once in a while, I get into a space with people where we just need to chat kind of about spirituality, but I still will always have my cards. So I'm always using my cards in one way or another, even if I'm just, I don't know. Yes, I'm always using the cards. For sure.
Awesome. So just to make sure everyone knows as well, if you have any questions for Michelle, be sure to put them in all caps in the chat. We are welcoming questions tonight, so let's have fun. So when it comes to tarot cards, for anyone who's seen my previous episodes, I've kind of talked with other guests about the different styles of cards. Mm-hmm. What is your style that you prefer to use?
Well, I'm pretty traditional with my decks. I have introduced a new deck into my practice, but I'm pretty traditional for the most part. So, and I have them here, so I'll just show you what I use. I always read with at least 2 decks, but I've gone up to the most I've ever used in a reading at one time is 5 decks. So we did get there once, but 3 is not uncommon, but it's always at least 2. So the primary deck that I use would be the standard Rider-Waite. You've seen, everybody knows it. Everybody knows it, right? So that's pretty much like, if you're in front of me, I'll hand you this deck of cards to read with, to shuffle while we talk, right? If not, if it's via video or on phone, I shuffle this deck of cards while you talk, right? And then I lay. So I do most of my practice probably really is on the phone at this point in time. So then I'll lay out these cards, but I also at the same time, then I'm shuffling the Thoth deck, Thoth deck. I don't know. I spent so much time in New Orleans. I'll never be able to pronounce that properly. Thoth, we say. But I'm always shuffling this deck, and I always use, this is kind of my go-to. I don't know. They're all my go-to decks, but this is the one that I keep in my hands that I shuffle. So once we get your cards out, and I'm looking at your big spread, I'll use my second deck to ask more questions usually. So, and so in this deck too, like, I love this deck because I trimmed it. So like, it doesn't have the words on the bottom of it. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, I think this deck looks really beautiful if you trim it. The key to that is you have to get the big ones. And then you trim them, and then you still have a regular size deck of cards. And so then my third deck that I generally like to have out, I just kind of changed decks a little bit, but is the Hermetic, the Godfrey Dawson deck, which I also colored. I don't know if I had told this story before, but I colored a lot of this deck. I mean, not all at once. There's some that are still blank. But I'll go through and meditate on the cards and color them in. But I had actually started doing it because the princesses, I love Godfrey's Dawson's art. I love it. I love this deck. This Hermetic deck has so much information in it that, I mean, like, you could just study this one deck your whole life. I think this is a really brilliant deck. Also, it's amazing. It's a really good deck. Also, the princesses in this deck are bare-chested, which is fine. I don't have any problem with that. But all 4 of the princesses had these huge boobs that stood straight up. Right? Like, if they had been smaller or floppier, or like just one of them had big plastic boobs, like, that's all good with me. But all of them, it bothered me. And so one day I had to put clothes on them. And so then after that, then I've colored in a lot on these, which I also recommend doing with a deck. It's a great way to get really personal with the deck. Okay, those are kind of three main decks that I'm really into, but I just recently finally picked up somebody gave me this deck because people give me decks once in a while, which is great. I love to get a deck of tarot cards at the same time that like I probably won't use them because I'm so attached to the decks that I know.
Yeah.
Um, right? But it's the Fountain Tarot deck. And so I don't know if you all have seen this. Let's draw one. Let's see. Let's draw a card for, let's see. Oh, this is, oh, it's great. It's the world, but it also features a bare chested woman, which I'm not against. It's just that it's kind of funny that it keeps coming up right now. Okay, but that's the Fountain Tarot. So
Wow.
that's actually the three decks I'm using right now is the Fountain, the Thoth, and the Waite Smith deck.
Oh
So,
wow.
yeah.
So when you say you're using multiple decks at one time, are you're pulling different cards from different decks? You're not pulling a set of cards and then pulling the same card from the other decks and evaluating them? I'm just trying to.
Oh no, I pull different cards, but what's interesting is how often, like okay, like when I lay out your 10 card spread, and like I'm also really traditional with spreads, also like in so many ways you get a. I'm very traditional in kind of the way that I approach, but then I think the way I read is because I mean I'm mostly a psychologist, like that's mostly what I'm doing. So the way I read might be a little bit different than the way other people read. But so I lay out your 10 cards. And so each card, I think of each card as being kind of like when I'm looking at it, like, did you ever have an advent calendar when you were a kid? Right?
You poke out the
You
chocolate.
right, yeah. Right. You open up the door and it's a little piece of chocolate. That's exactly how I see like the cards when I lay them out. So like behind I got chills now that I'm like talking about this, but where I see it as kind of like this advent calendar. So behind each card is more. And so I will look at like and say like I might want to. I mean, let's see. A good old hopes and fears is a good place to start a lot of times on a reading because I don't necessarily start at the beginning. I start where I need to on the reading. But let's say you've got like the devil in your hopes and fears, and I really want to know what that's all about. Like, like what's going on? What do we got going on there? I might lay out three other cards. Like, tell me about the devil. What do I need to know about what right or what does as a fear what does the devil have to say, and I'll lay out 5 cards, right? So I'm looking behind whatever cards I find interesting, or maybe that the person I'm talking to finds confusing. Like if we come across something and you want to know more about it, I may try to pull out more by laying down more cards on it. But how often I get the same cards from a different deck is where things get really intense, especially if I keep, especially if there's something where it's like, no, we have to keep digging on this. We have to keep looking around, or that can't really be the answer, which you already, I mean, when somebody comes to me for a reading, you kind of already know the answer. I mean, if you're coming to me to say like, should I leave my husband? You probably already know the answer to that. And I'm not really going to answer it one way or another.
Mhm.
But, not really. But like you'll probably really know what you feel like you need to do by the time you leave once you talk it through yourself, right? So if we hit these other cards and we keep kind of asking the same question again and getting the same cards again and again, it's like I don't know how much more we can find out about this. Like we get the leave run card every deck from every deck. But I have definitely had where I've had 2 or 3 cards that come up the same in 2 or 3 different decks. And that's when things get really, it blows me away sometimes where I'm like, how does that happen? Like if I wanted to do it, I couldn't possibly.
Yes.
Right? So
Yeah. So I mean, I guess at that point it means that the message is pretty clear about what's being
yeah.
said.
Yeah. But if we can interpret it, then yes, I think so. If we can get in there and get the right interpretation on it, then yeah, I think we can. I think that's the answer. So yeah.
That's amazing. So when you first got into reading tarot, on your website it says it was kind of during a time when you were ill and someone gave you a deck.
Yes.
What was it about the tarot that really kind of got you so into it? I guess.
Right. Well, I was a writer. I've always been a writer, and I was living in New Orleans in the U.S., and I was delivering pizzas on my bicycle. That's what I did for a living, which was a very cool job. But then at some point in time, I got hit by a car, and wound up having a pretty like. It's one of those things, man. I wound up being okay a couple days later, and like went back to work, and then 8 months later, I was in trouble. It was one of those like bone, like something in my neck was out of place.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my this arm had like gone out. Like I couldn't use this arm. My head was kind of like this. I was in a lot of pain. It was a pretty gnarly experience, really. And the thing was is that I couldn't write. I couldn't use my arm, right? And so like I couldn't, and that's what I did all the time. I wrote, and it got to the point that the pain was so bad I really couldn't read, and that's really what I did. I read books and I wrote books. That's really what I did, and I was in this situation where I couldn't really do that. And so somebody said the only thing that took my mind off of being in pain at that time was I had one housemate who would sometimes like read to me, right? Stories. That's where I'm going with this. It's all about stories. Stories were enough to like even take me out of pain, physical
Mhm.
pain. Um, anyway, someone else had said, I got these tarot cards and they're not for me, but you might really like them, and handed me the deck while I was laid up in bed. And it was the only thing besides somebody reading to me that would take my mind off of what was happening to me, what was physically happening to me. So, and it was really literally the only thing I could do for
Mhm.
3 months. I was in bed for 3 months. And
Oh.
tarot cards, like I couldn't, I was in too much pain to pick up a book, honestly, and focus on the story. I couldn't write anything. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go anywhere. So I laid in bed. And by the time I got up, I was like, who wants their tarot cards read? Like, I got this. But it helped me a lot emotionally during that time period. And then I was really hooked. I was good at it because of the way I had studied it, and
Mhm.
I was hooked on it because I love stories, and then also because now I had this relationship with it. I had this really intense relationship with it.
Oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you get out of reading for other people? Like, what does that provide for you? Why do you like it so much?
Yeah. Well, I always say to people too, and I say it a lot at the beginning, of a reading too, is this world's full of tarot card readers and full of therapists and people to talk to. So like if you're seeking me out specifically for a reading, I'm going to hear something that I need to hear. So it's either I'm going to learn something that I don't specifically know, or it's going to be that I need to hear again that I do know, but I've forgotten.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes, like with my own personal psychology and my own personal trauma, things that I've been through, ways that I can be with myself. I have pretty serious CPTSD. So there's certain ways too sometimes that I can think that it isn't such a great mindset to be in, right?
Mhm.
And when I'm talking to another person who encounters that same mind state, a lot of times the way that I'm able to give them space to do that allows me to like remind myself that I have to give myself space to do that. So there's this way for me in dealing with another person and getting in this space and seeing this person in front of me, or whether or not I might just be on the phone, which can be a really amazing experience also. But having this other person there and saying, the way that I love people so much when I read cards for them. I really like, we get into this space and I just have this real care for people. And I think that in that moment, too, there's different ways to put this, but I guess a way that I would be comfortable putting it is like, I just feel that suddenly I'm in this place where I'm seeing them to some degree the way God sees them, right?
Mhm.
So, like, right? So, like, you can kind of tell me, things that maybe you've done in your life that were not your proudest moments. And I really like in my regular Michelle life, like when I'm like whatever, like I'm hanging out at the coffee shop or I'm hanging out in chat, some nights, right? Like I might be a little bit more punchy and a little bit more judgmental than I am about things than when we make this like sacred space, right? So I guess the point that, right. So the point that I'm getting to also is that in that moment, and I'm talking to somebody else about their mind states or their problems, just like, I'm like, oh my gosh, but you're so amazing and you're so beautiful. And like, you survived all these things and you learned all these things and there's so much left to do. And like, what is this problem you have with yourself? Right? In that moment, then like, I hear my own mind saying like, like it's kind of exactly the way you talk to yourself, right? So that's so much healing that I get so often from reading cards for people comes from being able to give myself some space, for being able to learn things that I don't know yet. I mean, honestly, sometimes I'm just like, oh wow, I've never seen this situation from this point of view before. So this is this new viewpoint for me. So I learn things like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's funny leading up to like card readings. I might have a few of them in the day, and I wake up in the morning, and there's part of me that's like, oh, it's so much work, and the other part of me is like, you love this. Get up and do this, and you're going to be so much more energized after you do a reading today. You're going to feel so much better than you do now. So, and it's not really that I dread readings. Don't get me wrong, y'all. Like everybody, we all dread when we have to be on in some way. We all, right? You're
Yeah.
just like, even if it's something that you love, it's you're like, all right, get it together. Come on, team, go for it. Pep up. So,
So, question from the chat from BG's. She wants to know, do you read for yourself regularly?
oh, odd, yes. I also teach tarot, and one of the things that I say is stop trying to read for yourself. Make tarot friends. Like now you're in a tarot class, so make tarot friends so you all can trade. Um, right? Because you really do need that. Yes, I do read cards for myself. I read cards kind of constantly, but I'll throw down 10 cards on myself and look at it for 5 seconds. And I'm like, oh, well, now. All right. Don't get, like, okay, okay. Like I'm either like, oh, I was thinking about something else. I know what I asked, but I was thinking about something else. So that can't be right. It's either that or it's just like it's such a cursory. I'm like, yeah, 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 yada yada yada, and I kind of put them back. Like, I knew you were gonna say that. Whereas when I'm with a client, like it's stuck to the table. Whatever we get is what we work with. We talk through it for a long time. I draw other cards on it. So I do read for myself, but not reliably. Like if it's something that really I have a lot of anxiety about, by the time I'm done reading for myself, I'm like, well, now I know less what I should do than I did when I started. But I do have tarot friends that I go to.
Awesome. All right. So, CW has a question for you.
Okay.
He wanted to know how important is familiarity with the traditional meanings of the cards to you?
Oh, okay. Pretty important. Like I would say that it's definitely something that I teach, and I teach from a couple of different traditions. Probably most specifically, Waite's tradition, and then also a Crowley's tradition. Um, Rachel Pollack, though, is probably one of I think my favorite and best teachers. Um, as much as I think that we all have stories about each of the cards that are our own, which is another thing I really encourage. Like, find what is your story with this card, whether it's like your personal story or it's a story from a movie or something that really sticks with you, then that's the way you're going to remember this card. But as far as the traditional meanings of the cards go, because there's different, I mean, you look up, there's all kinds of different meanings, right? But I think that there's a point to the spine in the traditional meanings of the cards, and that it's important to learn them. I do think that there's other people who say, just look intuitively at the cards, and I actually know someone who reads that well and reads pretty well. I'm like, oh wow. But for me, no, I would say learning the traditional meanings of the cards will help you have a deeper relationship with them, and then also over time will give you a more flexibility with them in the readings that you do. Like they'll expand for you over time if you
Mhm.
kind of start with the spine. That's that's my
So then that's the way kind of, so when you're doing your readings, you're personally basing it off initially the traditional definitions of the cards, and then you're kind of building upon that based on your own experiences with the cards then.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right. So I had another question and then it kind of went out of my head. So that wasn't helpful. Um, and it's gone. All
Well,
right.
it'll
Hope.
come back. I can tell you this too in terms of like traditional meanings of the cards and how that expand helps you expand. I had I was doing like a 5 card readings for somebody at a fair, like quick stuff, right? And I'm sorry, 15-minute readings. But I'd laid down 5 cards for this woman, and the last card was the Three of Cups, which is it's abundance, it's celebration, particularly with women, or maybe just social celebration, right? It's those things. But in that moment of I laid down this 5 card narrative for her, and when I got to the end and I turned that card over and I looked at it, I knew instantly. I looked at her and I said, no one can ever please you. And she was like, that's it. That's kind of the story of my life. Like, you got it, right? Now, that is not a meaning on that card that, like, if I'm giving you the short notes, right? That's a deeper thing that I got to many years later, knowing that what that spine of that card is, right? It's like celebrating with other people. It's having this celebration, it's having this abundance, right? So, but in that moment, then also my intuitive powers in the because I don't think I've read that card that way before or since then,
Mhm.
but it's not an inappropriate meaning of the card. And so I guess what I'm saying about that is that once I flipped it over and I saw that, and that was a very correct reading for this woman, is that my understanding of that card is deep because I started with the spine, and now I'm able to like go into these intuitive modes where I'm like, oh wow, even though that fits this card, that makes sense that that could be contained in this card. It isn't one of the more overt meanings. So you go
Mhm.
through layers of meanings with the cards. So I would share that.
All right. That makes a lot of sense. So speaking of, really mastering the cards, BG's wants to know about how long you think that took you. Because you did say that you were studying while you were kind of bound, but how long was it before you felt like you had totally mastered the cards and were really comfortable with them?
Right. It was about 10 years, and I read a lot during that time period. It was really, there were a couple of different places where I really felt like where I was getting good at it. And it was about 10 years in where I felt like, no, I could take money for it. And I would like, write, and I would kind of make that part of my life, which I started doing in 2012. And then, though, like I really turned another corner, I would say about 4 years ago. It was really probably just about 4 years ago that I really was like, all right, I got this. And also, like, there's so much more to learn. You put me in a room with a bunch of tarotists, like yourselves, and you start like throwing out some knowledge about it. I'm gonna be like, whoa, you're blowing my mind. Like, I don't. There's so you're killing me over here. There's so much to know. But where I really felt like, no, I can do this. I can teach this. I can read these cards. Like, I can really see myself as adept. Is about 4 years ago. So what is that? 15 minus 2, 13. It's like 13 years.
Oh
And I
wow.
read pretty much during that time until I really felt like, until I really, really felt like you put a deck of tarot cards in my hand and I really just, we're going to have a good reading. Like
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen. Right. So,
Mhm. That's amazing. And really, it shows how dedicated you really have to be to really kind of have that connection with them to that degree that you're talking about.
yeah, I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
And I mean, you're not the first person to really mention like such a long time frame. I've heard other people
Right.
mention that as well because they are so deep and they are so layered. So it makes a
Right.
lot of sense.
Yeah.
So Philip Blair wants to know, do you have any books that you can recommend? One older and one newer, and why?
Okay. Um, I'm going to give you two newish ones. Actually, it's Rachel Pollack. is The 78 Degrees of Wisdom. Really important book. And another new one is Melissa Sanova's Kitchen Table Tarot. Also very important. And those are new books, and those are really accessible books. And those are like, you'll really know a lot about tarot when you're done with those two books. And then the older one, I mean, just like Toth, you can't get away from it. I don't think. And I mean, like the little bit, I mean, like, you have to take Crowley with such a grain of salt. And then also you kind of have to take a bath after you read him a little bit. But no, I don't know about that. But I do actually think Toth is a really important book. I think Crowley is an important tarot reader. So I know that he comes with a lot of controversy, and I'm probably like, I probably am like, oh yes, I'm on the side of he was a very bad man who did very bad things for very bad reasons, and probably has more influence on our contemporary world than I think most of us would really be comfortable with. But anyway, there's my old book, would be Crowley's book.
All right. So I wanted to kind of know, there are some people in the chat who have never had a reading.
Mm-hmm.
So could you kind of describe for them what they could expect going into a reading, and what they should, and how they should kind of prepare?
Okay. All right. Well, all readers are different. So you really want to find a reader that's either somebody that's been recommended to you by a friend, or somebody that you that you find their website or their materials, and you feel like you're connecting with them on an intellectual, spiritual level, because it takes all kinds. Okay. And there's all kinds of, every kind of person you'll find in any other part of the world, you're going to find them reading tarot cards. So you first want to find a reader that that you can resonate with and trust to a degree. And then also, I would say, have a question. There are some readers that'll take you on general, and some that won't. But I think it's more beneficial to you to have a question when you show up for it, and then also to ask questions as you go along the way. I guess the main thing I would say about getting a tarot reading is don't go to the extreme of either trying to make the reader very happy or trying to make the reader very unhappy. Like, just go, like every once in a while, I sometimes kind of check in with a client, like, to make sure that they don't just want to make me feel comfortable, because I'm okay, I'm good. And if I'm not saying the right thing and doing a good job, then let me do that for you. So I would also say, when you go into a reading, it's your reading. So make sure that that you feel like you have control over it. If there's places you don't want to go with people, make sure that you're not going there. If you don't want to talk to your dead grandma, like, you might want to, right? Like you might want to, then you probably don't. I don't do mediumship, so that won't happen in my parlor. But you may not want to go to a medium. What was the other thing that I wanted to say that you should expect? It's funny, because another workshop that I teach is on ethics and client rights. And so, like, I feel like I want to go into all of this, like, ethics and client, but I don't think that's what you're asking me. I think what you should expect is somebody who feels very soothing to you, and it actually makes you feel empowered when you leave. That's what I think that you should be looking for, and what you should be expecting. If you think that somebody can tell you what to do with your life, they can't. They can't. And if they say that they can tell you what to do with your life, do not give them your money. Give it to a homeless person. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's kind of a misconception a lot of people have, that they're going to get the answer to everything, or the answer of what they're supposed to do, when really it's kind of more of a snapshot more than anything. I would kind of describe it.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. I see it as a way to, like, talk through things, and also to look at options. If you have very real, you're like, well, I don't know if I should, I don't know if I should move to California, or if I should move to Washington State. I don't know if I should go to nursing school, or if I should become a dental hygienist. Like, we can look at the different things that are going to happen per those choices, as long as those choices are actually things that you're thinking about. Like if you kind of are like, well, should I move to a different country? But you're not really not that's not really something that's going to be considered. I'm just going to get if you're not really considering moving to another country, I'm just going to get it's just going to be garbled, right? I'm not going to get anything. You're not really considering it. How would it be if I did something I'm not really considering doing? Well, it'll be like nothing because you're not really considering doing it. So we can't see what you'll feel like afterwards. So hopefully that's helpful. I think the more specific you are with the reader, the better.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Because I think that also people kind of don't understand that in some cases, if you go in and you're just kind of like, read me,
Yeah.
it's hard for the reader to really narrow down kind of what to really focus on. Wouldn't you
Right.
agree with that, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think even a good reader, when they're doing a general reading, you're going to get general answers. Like, if you're moving, that's something that comes up a lot in the cards. Like, if you're moving, just because like you and your family are moving, I might see that in the cards, right? And I might talk about it mildly, but you might be moving for some really big reason. Like your parents might be sick, or you might be, like I don't know, you might be moving for some really big reason. So like if I know what that big reason is, then like when I see cards that are, like the Nine of Swords or something comes up, like then I'm like, oh well, you feel bad because your parents are sick. Not well, it looks like you're gonna have a lot of trouble, getting into your new place. It looks like there's gonna be a lot of like turmoil in moving into your new place, right? Like if I just think you're
Mm-hmm.
moving, I'm like, well, then this Nine of Swords must be a permit issue, or it must be, something happens with the house and it's hard for you to actually get in there. Whereas if I know your parents are sick, it's like, oh well, you're gonna be having emotional problems regarding this, and you're gonna this is some advice that I can give you about how to manage that.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, sorry, my computer just freaked out a little bit
Okay.
because I'm trying to get your links into the
Okay,
into the
cool.
description, and then all of a sudden it's kind of freaking out. But no, that does make a lot of sense, really, to explain it that way. So here's another question for you. Could you kind of talk a little bit about your classes, because I know that you do teach. You've mentioned it a few times that you do teach classes on reading the tarot.
Hmm.
So could you kind of give more of a description of what they are and what kinds of things that you're covering in your classes?
Absolutely. I do a 6 week class that I love to do. And so we do two sections on the major arcana, then we do the court cards, and then we do two sections on the minor arcana. And I guess I go through the whole deck, mostly trying to get what I really try to get with that 6 week class is for everybody to see the tarot as, particularly the major arcana, as being a story, right? And you can tell it from, like, you can look at the Fool as how you're born, and you can see the world as your soul leaving the body at the moment of death, if you like, and kind of take everybody through it as a story, and get them to start relating to the figures in the tarot as characters who have certain proclivities and certain ways of confronting things or handling things or looking at things, right? So you start to see this perspective, not just from the characters themselves, but to see your own perspective evolve over your lifetime, right? So I just try to get everybody kind of like really settled with, like, tarot is the main way that you're really going to understand tarot and come into having it be very useful for you is to understand that nothing can happen in the tarot story that can't happen to you. Like it's human life, right? So making the tarot deck something that's very, very comfortable. You pull a card from the deck at any point in time, and you can learn something about yourself or other people from just looking at that card. Whether you're using it as a divinatory tool or not. So I walk people through in that class, through a lot of journaling and using the tarot for self-discovery, right? And also trying to get people, like, for example, like the Fool card, if you can, if it helps you at all, like the Fool, like who are like famous fools, like Forrest Gump is a really famous fool, right?
Yeah.
Um, but also that the card of the Fool could be told as the story of the Buddha, when he finally, when Siddhartha gets them to open the the gates so he can leave the kingdom, and he discovers old age, sickness, and death. Like that could be the Fool. He's innocent. He doesn't know any of those things. And then when he sees old age, sickness, and death, and he falls off, the cliff. That's we could see the Fool, right? So getting people to associate the cards with stories is one of the main things that I do. Then I also, for me, I teach the court cards a little bit differently because I use the court cards a little bit differently. So the way that I see the deck is basically like this. I look at the major arcana as being like, I kind of like to look at them a little bit as like, I like myths, a lot, right? So like that's another reason why the tarot grabbed me, right? But I like to look at them kind of as immortals or superheroes or the realm of the gods or something like that, right? They're extra worldly in this way. And so then I like to see the minor cards as like us, our little mundane life. Like we're going to work, we're carrying too many sticks and the 10 of wands, or like we're broke and the 5 of discs, or, we're falling in love and the 2 of cups, whatever it is, that's our little human life. And we're going through our little human life, right? And then I look at the court cards as being kind of a liaison between those two things. And so sometimes I might call on a court card that hasn't even shown up in a reading and ask like, well, what would the Queen of Swords want to ask the Hermit about this situation? Or what would the King of Cups want to ask, the High Priestess about this situation? I use the court cards a lot as a personality that can speak between the worlds. So I call on them a lot for a variety of things. So that's different. That's a unique way of using the tarot cards or of using the court cards. So I do teach that. That is, but I teach the traditional way too with the court, with the court cards. I'm like, I'm going to go over the traditional stuff. I mean, the court cards are so hard to use anyway. Right? I mean, you
They
spend,
drive me crazy.
yes. I mean, and they do for everyone. I mean, really, like people have been doing it for 30 or 40 years are like, it's court cards, right? But anyway, the way that I kind of teach them, I had a recent student say to me, "You're the first person who ever made the court cards make any sense." And I'm like, all right, cool. My work is done here. So anyway, so that's something that I do teach that's a little bit different. So I think I summed that up. But that's the 6-week class. Mostly it's me just not shutting up. It's just 6 weeks of me just talking about tarot and telling tarot stories. And then, because I don't really teach divination in that class so much. I mean, I might say like this is the traditional fortune telling on this, or in a reading, you might do this. But more than anything, it's just to get you to feel like you know all of these people and you know all of these situations. And if you don't, you could, right? If it could happen to another person, it can happen to you. And I think there's a lot of that in the tarot. And then and then I teach some offshoot classes that teach a little, like that's the 6 week. And like I said, it's just me not shutting up. And then I also teach other classes that go along with it on spreads, on doing actual session work with people. Like I said, I do one on ethics and clients' rights, which is like a really fun class, I think, actually. Then there might be I think there's another one I do that's like writing. I think I know there's another one I do with doing writing stories from tarot cards. So
Oh wow,
yeah, that's a fun one.
it really sounds like you make it very approachable.
I hope so.
Classes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So Rogue Faction actually wants you to kind of elaborate a little bit more on ethics, because he says that that's his main concern as a skeptic. Are the ethics of readers, in cases of like charlatans and such. Like, how do you view ethics with regards to the cards?
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I think it's a huge issue. So for people that are doing any kind of session work, I teach an ethics class. I feel like since we're not licensed, we don't get that. We don't get that drilled into us. We're kind of free agents in that way. Although I will say this, the one card reading I got that I felt like was actually damaging to me was from somebody who had been a licensed social worker at one point. Like and had changed up to do a different career. But I mean, like she was actually someone who should have known better than what she had done. So ethics for me are, first of all, you can't tell the future for anyone. So if someone is saying to you, like, you're saying, well, are you going to be able to tell me what I should do? And they're saying, oh yeah, 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 I got those answers. I think that's, I mean, but you'll get that a lot from tarot card readers. Like that's not outside of the business of it. But I think there's something unethical in that personally. I do this, and I do know people who do mediumship, and that I think are good at it, and that I think have something to offer through it. So I'm not entirely against mediumship,
Mhm.
but I am, wow, really, really cautious. I really, um, man, somebody's going to talk to your dead brother for money. I don't know about that. Even though, having said that, I do know people that I think do. But their work is a little bit different than that. It's more energetic and it's more therapeutic than it is like, oh, well, your brother said this and your brother said that. Um, so that one's a tough one. So I think that stuff can be really unethical. I think it can be. I don't think it always is.
Mhm.
Um, and then too, another thing too is, I think that there's readers out there who would say, well, I'm still helping people, even if they feel connected or they feel better. I don't know. It's a tough one. But no, I think as skeptics should have. I think ethics is a big one because you are in a position where people are being very vulnerable with you. They
Yeah.
want answers, right? Sometimes they're in very desperate situations.
Mhm.
Sometimes they have nobody else that they can talk to. So it's like, whew, I got chills all over me for that one too. So I think it's, I just, what do I want to say about ethics? I think you always have to be honest with people about what you can and can't do. And I think you always have to be honest with people that you can't tell them what to do with their lives. And that any healing work that you're going to do with them is going to be co-healing. I think those would be the main things that I would have to say about that because there are charlatans out there. It's one of the main things that drove me to start creating the workshop, and I'll be creating more from more writing work and more from that. But it's one of having that experience, seeing that in my own life. I was like, wow, really? You sit over there and take money for this?
Mhm.
Ew. But being somebody who I just have pretty much retired from doing fairs at this point in time, but somebody who's done lots of psychic fairs, uh, there's plenty of BS to go around out there. And some of it I think is benign, and some of it I think is reprehensible. So, yes, good for the skeptics.
So, have you ever been in a situation when you're doing a reading and you're kind of, and like it's not clear, like the cards are just kind of not really conveying really anything clearly to you?
Hmm. I have actually had that happen. One thing that I will definitely do at fairs in particular is I've never had it in my private practice actually. Now that I'm thinking that, because everybody in my private practice, for the most part, one of the reasons I'm retiring from the fairs is like I don't get regulars coming
Yeah.
back to my practice as much from that. They want a little something different from me than what I do. Like this is for entertainment. And I'm not that entertaining in a way. So um, I'm not. I'm really not. I'm not like, you're going to get the man and the money, because sometimes that's what people want to hear. And that's not really my style. But at fairs, sometimes I just recently, I know I said I'm retiring, but I just recently did one. And I gave money back to a couple of people. I just said, you know what? I'm not the right reader for you. And it was because like they were presenting, um, kind of they wanted that general reading. And when I pressed for questions, they didn't really have them. And then when I started reading the cards, they're saying, well, no, no. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not the reader for you then.
Mm-hmm.
And so that does happen. Like I said, at the fairs, I think because they're looking for something different from
Yeah.
me, right. Have I ever had, I'm really trying to think. I've never had that happen in my private practice, but at fairs, it will
It,
for sure.
it does make sense that it would happen at fairs. I mean,
Hmm.
because you're having all of these different people with all these different energies also like coming through constantly, and it's kind of having to switch. I think if you're
Yeah.
in private practice and you're working with someone, it's easier to connect with their energy and be able to pull the cards for them a little more easily.
Yeah, I agree. And the way that they're coming to me also, which is
Yeah.
mostly by word of mouth. So
Mhm.
it's other people who have kind of a similar social outlook, maybe like social or political or spiritual outlook to
Yeah.
myself. And so, it's more so maybe than at the fairs. Not that I don't have great and amazing readings at fairs sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, I am so glad I was here for that today. And then other times I'm like, oh, girl, go get your tea leaves read. I can't. I don't know. I'm not right for you.
So Philip Blair wants to know, has anything paranormal ever happened during a reading?
During a reading, I did actually. It was I don't read I Ching presently, but for a while I was reading I Ching, and I had pretty intense experiences with I Ching and not enough knowledge, which is kind of why, and it's not my tradition, so it's a lot of why I stepped back from it. But I was momentarily doing these kind of intense I Ching sessions, and I guess this is paranormal, but I had an experience, my one and only experience of having of channeling where I wasn't present.
Hmm.
But I forget what they call that. There's a word for that. Like some people are a conscious channel, so they're there and they hear it. But this one experience where I was just like, "What happened? What
Or
did
you
I
took a step
say?"
back, I guess.
Yeah, yes. When I really didn't know what I said, I talked for an hour. Right, my throat was dry. Right, and right, and I really did not know what I had said. And so, which all turned out to be pretty cool stuff. Like she was able to reiterate it to me, and I was like, I said all that. So I guess that's paranormal. And I continued forward with the I Ching for a little while after that. It's not like it scared me. It was more like I felt like I feel like I need permission to use the I Ching, and maybe I didn't have it. I guess that
Mhm.
maybe is another conversation. But I guess that would be the most paranormal thing to happen during a reading. If something else comes up in my mind, I'll tell you.
Perfect then. So speaking of the fact that you bring up the I Ching, are there other tools that you do use?
No, that was one that I did for a while. I had the tarot and the I Ching,
Mhm.
and then I had thought about bringing some other things in. Somebody gave me some ruins. Somebody gave me some oracle cards, and I love the aesthetic of the crystal ball, but none, nothing else is really. I mean, like my pendulum works, but I have never asked a yes or no question in my life. I'm like, what do I? Like, what do I need this? Like, what am I going to do with this? Like I have never, I don't know, I've never answered a question yes or no, obviously, and I've never asked for. So the answer is no. There, no.
All right, that makes sense. Um, okay, so I'm trying to see if the chat has more questions because we're going to wrap up in probably about 10 minutes.
Okay.
I do want to talk to you about your writing and your mythology, but I kind of feel like that's a whole nother topic that would probably take a while. So I'm going
Right.
to have you come back to talk about that
That sounds great.
because I would love that. Um,
Yes. Awesome.
but I guess did have another question come up. So Philip Blair said to qualify his question about the paranormal experiences, he said, have you had paranormal experiences outside of readings?
Yes.
We would like you to elaborate on those.
Okay. I'll tell you my two main ones. One was when I was a kid, and one was just a couple years ago. So when I was a kid, my grandmother used to come to stay at our house, and she would always sleep in my bed, and I loved that. I loved my grandmother. I loved when she came to stay. I loved that she slept in my bed, and I got to sleep in my Snoopy bag, sleeping bag in the living room. I just thought that was the coolest stuff, coolest thing in the world, right? So she
Mhm.
came one night, and I was, I don't know, 7, 8 years old enough to not have just like toddler tantrums, right? And I wasn't like that anyway, you know. I was a pretty good kid, and like I said, I love this whole thing. But anyway, my grandma came that night, and I threw an absolute out of character tantrum, and I did not want to give her my bed. And I can still remember my mother like talking through her teeth at me, like, "What is wrong with you?" You know, like, right? Because it was like I was being so mean to my granny, right? And so, but then my granny's like, no, that's fine. She wants her bed. You know, she can have her bed. You know, one of those like granny moments, like, oh no, far be it for me, you know, or whatever. So, so she slept on the couch, and I got my bratty bed, you know. But even my mother's like, I've never seen you act like this because I didn't do that, right? Okay, so in the middle of the night, it was this old, heavy framed, like twin bed or single bed, right? And the headboard was this big piece of wood. And the mattress, at some point in the night, I heard it cracking, and I jumped up, sprung out of bed, right? And before and it cracked and the bed broke. And I remember everybody comes running in. And I remember my mom turning on the light. And what we saw was the mattress where my head was had gone, slipped under the headboard. And the headboard was like this, right? Like crushing the pillow, right where my head was.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so I know. And so my mom, I remember this so well. She squeezed my shoulder and she said, "That's where your grandmother's head would have been." You know, like basically, like your grandmother would not have sprinted out of the bed.
Hmm.
So
That
that
just gave me chills right there.
I know every time I tell it, it gives me chills because, and you know, and so I think that that's a paranormal experience because I think I was like kind of possessed by something, you know, right? Because I
Hmm.
did something that was so out of character and really, you know, like, so something had to kind of like take me over. It wasn't like I was saying, like, if grandma sleeps in that bed, she's going to be hurt. I was just being a little brat. So I feel like, you know, it wasn't me. It was something else that saved her and kind of threw me under the bus to do it, actually. But that would be the one that when I was a kid that I remember. And the other one just happened a few years ago. And I was moving something. Me and my mom, again, we're moving something. And I looked up and I saw, I mean, it was maybe like this big. And it was like just like a little, like a cute little like cloud, like a little energetic cloud. It was like white and kind of energetic, right? And it was like moving like this. And I was like, I had my mouth open to talk, and my dog, Friday, was next to me. And I looked at her, and she was watching it too. So we were both like watching this cloud. And I'm like, that thing is there. Like, she can see it. And like, I kind of wanted to say to my mom something, but I also didn't want it to like go away. All right. So here's a little backstory you got to know is that my mom's, what do you call it? Like her obsession, one of her like obsessions, one of the things that she does is she collects scarves and purses from thrift stores because she's like, it was just $1. It's only $1. Like, right. So she has tons of like scarves and purses that she never uses and she gives them away, whatever. She has fun with it. But there was a stack of purses on the floor. This is so weird. But so there's a stack of purses on the floor. And as I'm like kind of getting ready to say something, this cloud goes over, and I'm not kidding. It lifted a little corner on one of the purses on the in the stack, and I was like, "Holy crap! Like that's amazing." Move that, and at that moment, my mom saw it, and she said, "Oh, I got." Friday's my dog, okay? So I got Friday a purse, okay? And so because Friday Friday loves fur, like anything
Yeah.
that's like furry, right? And we travel all the time. So she's in the car a lot and we have to pack her things, right? So it was this little fur bag that somebody had made. It was like fur inside and like fur outside. and like it was just kind of crooked and ridiculous looking. And it was basically she got her a fur purse. She actually, the dog loves the purse.
Oh, no, I'm sure I believe it.
So she got her the fur purse and she was like, "Oh, I thought you could put her toys in there and then it would like be a toy for her too, right?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Which it is." Anyway, this little cloud of smoke had gone right to that. And my mom's like, "Oh, that purse is for Friday." And then the little cloud of smoke was gone.
Oh.
So like I don't know, this little cloud showed up to remind my mom to give my dog her fur purse. Like I don't know, I can't explain it, but it was there. And those would be the two like really solid paranormal experiences. And maybe that trance channeling, that's what they call it. Maybe the trance channeling moment. Those would be my three.
No, those are pretty cool.
I know, it was that little cloud of smoke was totally amazing. And I was just like, "Who's your buddy, Friday?" Who's like, "Oh, hey, she got you a thing." Like, I don't know. Pretty cool.
That is very cool. All right. Baz wants to know, do you think that the minor arcana were never really part of the whole tarot? That is, have they been added on later? Is his question.
Mm. I'm working on this history, Baz. I'm working on this. But yes, I think that actually they started in two different places. And I think that perhaps they were both being used for. I think you had your minor arcana match your regular deck of cards, right? So I think that people were using those regular decks of cards to do regular card decky things, play games, number games, and so on and so forth. And somebody was probably also using them for cartomancy. I mean, I think
Yeah.
cartomancy, right? I think cartomancy is a pretty natural.
Yeah. And I'll be honest. I mean, I probably not a whole lot of people know this, but Vietnamese people, when they do card readings, they don't use tarot cards. They use playing cards.
Right.
So they actually use those entirely, and that's it.
That's it. Right. Okay. So there you go. So use cartomancy. So people using that deck for cartomancy. And then I think that the tarot, the major arcana, we kind of do, I think we pretty much do know was ordered by, I forget the Italian king's name, was ordered. He wanted these cards made so that he could play a story game with his like aristocratic friends. So like they're just literally just characters from a story, but a part of why I think you have the emperor and the empress, and like it's kind of situated in this hierarchical kind of way, has to do with the fact that it was ordered by a king. Like I'm gonna play story games with my rich bored friends. I think is how that went. So, but for sure, that's like the tarot was ordered by a king to make a story game. But again, you've got cards. So anybody getting their hands on those major arcana like that, I think probably started divining with them also. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that human beings just do. They're like, "What is that? Tea leaves? Let's read them. Bones? Let's read them. Cards? Let's read them." Like, I think that's just kind of one of the things that we do. And then I think at some point in time, they were put together, and which I just gave a talk on what I kind of think happened with this too, where I'm like, can you imagine how magical it would be, like to see a tarot deck like for the first time, like when like you've never seen major arcana cards before, and here they are in this like deck of playing cards, like just like my imagination on that, just like sitting down with some probably Romani woman from a carnival probably, and just and seeing those cards, I'd be like, whoa, like that would really have, like, wow, you're really blowing my mind or whatever. So yeah, I think they started separately. I don't know if one necessarily, well, I guess I would think that the minors would predate. I mean, I think major arcana came along later, but yeah, I think they started separately and combined.
That makes a lot of sense. So Michelle did say that the best story she's heard today is Friday's purse.
Great.
So that's been determined as the best story.
Yes.
So Bunya wanted to know, is it possible? I don't know if this is something that you do, but do you know if it's, I guess, practical for someone to have a tarot reading and an astrology reading together?
Oh yeah, I think that's really cool. If there's somebody who can do both of those, I don't do astrology. So like I don't that's not in my bag of tricks. But yes, astrology is it's you can find it in the cards anyway. The cards have all these various relationships to astrology. But yeah, I actually think having your chart read and then having your cards read along with your chart would be a really good way to go. I think that's really a cool idea.
Yeah, no, it does sound, it would kind of give like a really big picture, right?
Yeah, wouldn't it? Yeah, I would think so. I haven't done that either. I do know some friends that have more astrology in their readings though. So like when they do my tarot cards, they're always like, "Oh, well, this Libra, Venus stuff." And I'm like, "Oh, good, cool. I don't know."
Because I know in some books I've read, they'll tie like different signs to the different cards.
Right, right.
So, yeah. I mean, I'm not fully aware of what they are exactly, but I've seen it come up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good combo.
Yes. All right. So I just asked the chat for any final questions. So we'll give them a minute. And if not, then we will
Okay.
wrap it up.
Thank you for having me on tonight. It's been so fun.
I know I've had fun too. This hour just flew by.
It did. I
It was
agree.
great. All right. So it seems like it seems like the answer to that is no. I know that a lot of people have said that they've learned a lot. You've given some good insight into kind of tarot overall and how a reading really goes.
Good.
So thank you so much again for joining us. And yeah, you're gonna have to come on again and we have to talk about writing because that writing and mythology are totally my jam. So we will have
All right. We will do it.
good conversations on that.
Okay.
All right. All right. So I want to thank everyone else. And remember, I have the links to Michelle's websites all down below, including her tarot website, her spellcasting website, her YouTube channel, and her WordPress.
Yay.
And you are on Twitter as well? Yes. I know that you are, but
Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Yep.
All right. So you can look her up there if you guys want to follow. Yeah. So until next time, I will be back on Friday. I will have another episode on, I don't think I decided. So I guess I'm going to figure that out before Friday and let you guys know. But until then, I hope you guys have a great week and I'll catch y'all soon. Bye.